Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the podcast and webcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you, because if you're on this show, you're probably a wholesale change agent too. My name is Ian Heller with Distribution Strategy Group. I'll be your co-host today, along with my marvelous business partner who's dressed up like a blue Waldo today. If you're on the video podcast, you can see that for yourself.
Popeye the Sailor Man, toot-toot.
Jonathan Vine, PhD. Jonathan, we had a funny start this morning because you and I were chattering like the immature 16-year-olds we actually are on the inside. We didn't realize that the webcast had already started, and we're like, where's the broadcast button? And we're being goofballs, but the broadcast had already started. So we had about 5 people who got to watch our immaturity. And all I can say is that's a marvelous insight into our true character.
It is. Maybe we can continue for the next 58 minutes. Let's go.
All right. Well, hey, we've got a great show today, but before we get into it, we have to do just a little bit of business. So we have a couple of sponsors today. So these sponsors are very important to us because we couldn't do the show without them. So first, I want to thank Epicor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Epicor, a company that has been helping thousands of wholesale distributors integrate all of their business functions into one enterprise resource planning or ERP system for over 50 years. Because of their deep experience in the distribution business, they get you and your unique distribution challenges. Epicor's ERP solutions were designed with distributors for distributors. That just means that their solutions are built specifically with the right functionality for the distribution world. They're ready to use out of the box without complex and expensive customizations. It's one of the top reasons new customers tell Epicor that they selected Epicor for distribution solutions over others. You can learn more about Epicor at epicor.com/distribution. That's epicor.com/distribution. So thank you, Epicor. We really, really appreciate your support. Our other sponsor today is Proton.ai. Proactive inside sales reps are usually more productive, efficient, and cost-effective than traditional field sellers. Sales teams that lean heavily towards inside sales can accomplish more with less. Even so, studies show that inside sales reps spend only 33% of their time actually selling. Admin and order taking tasks eat up a lot of time. So imagine the impact of increasing the time inside sales reps spend selling. Reps that are armed with a system of action, a tool that guides them to the right customers at the right time with the right product recommendations or insights, they deliver better customer experiences. They keep customers coming back and spending more. Proton AI is the tool that enables this customer experience. Proton guides sellers to customers who need attention and finds timely sales opportunities for them to pursue. With Proton, your inside sales team can manage more customers, prevent churn, and grow revenue all out of one system. If you're interested in seeing how this has boosted sales productivity by 10 to 25% for distributors in your industry, reach out to Jill at proton.ai. That's Jill at proton.ai. So thank you to Epicor. Thank you to Proton for making this program possible. Jonathan, we got a great topic today, my friend.
Really rich topic, super rich topic. And I know you've got opinions and experience on this, as do I. Let's start by talking about the definition of inside sales. So I know you have strong opinions on this. Why don't you share kind of what you've observed just with the use of that term, and then I'm going to go into a more specific definition of it. Once
you got it. So most distributors call their what we would call customer service people inside salespeople, right? And they count them. If you ask how many salespeople do you have, and they say 100, they typically mean I have 20 outside sellers and 80 people answering the phone that I call inside sales. As we know, those people are essential to your company. They provide really important service to customers, but typically they're not really wired to be salespeople. They're customer service people. They avoid confrontation, which is one of the reasons they discount so much. They're not good at proactive outside account management. They're really customer service, and since they play a more important role than a typical customer service person does, I understand why distributors call them inside sales people, but they're not actually account managers.
Beautiful. So, I think that the confusion or conflation of terms is a good launch point into. Let's look at 4 different categories of inside sales. So you mentioned the customer service, the reactive only. They handle service and order activities. There are people who are called inside sales. They are typically reactive only. They could have an assigned customer base, and they could do some selling on the inbound call. Some portion of them could do inbound selling on the inbound call. By the way, a tool like Proton.ai is going to help people do selling on the inbound call, which is a nice thing to have either what we're calling customer service or inside sales start to generate revenue for you. A third category would be outbound telemarketing. And this is proactive calling only. They're one-off, it's campaign driven. It's also often used for appointment setting or campaign driven. So we're going to call that outbound telemarketing. What we want to focus on today is what we call proactive inside sales. And as the name indicates, it is proactive calling only. It is outbound. There's an assigned account base, and it's about relationship building, much the way a field sales rep would do. So in this world that we're talking about, the proactive inside sales rep, really the main difference between that proactive inside sales rep and your field sales rep is one gets in a car and the other doesn't.
Yeah, it's funny how it's such a simple difference, but it seems to be confusing to people when we talk to them.
What do you think that confusion is about, or what's the source of that confusion?
I think it's because people have a paradigm, and hardened paradigms can be hard to break, right? And there's a paradigm that the people who sit on the phones in my branches are inside salespeople. And so if you try to recast what that means in terms of the actual work activity, they have a hard time getting there, right? Salespeople, by definition, get in their car most of the time and drive to accounts. People who sit in the branch are inside salespeople. They provide outstanding and essential service to customers. And so you're trying to get me to think of this account manager as someone who looks like my customer service people. And I have a hard time getting there mentally.
That's right. And part of it, I think, and you and I've discussed this before, is they confuse the psychographic, that the hunter is the proactive type. The perhaps farmer, but almost certainly not hunter, they may not even be a farmer, would be that customer service or inside sales rep, right?
Yeah, like 85% of people who work over the phone can either be great at customer service or they can be great at making outbound calls. The problem is that 15% misleads us to think that that's the norm when it's the exception.
That's right.
So I'll tell my inside sales reps who are really customer service people, hey, when you're not busy, I'm going to give you a stack of accounts that haven't bought from us for a while. I'd like you to call them, right? And so, you have 10 people you've assigned this, call this list of accounts work when you're not busy, and one of them can do it. And so everybody points to Barbara and says, hey, Barbara can do it. Why can't the rest of you? Well, the rest of them just aren't wired for it. And so Barbara makes you think they can all do it when in fact she's a unicorn.
Barbara's a unicorn, yes. Yeah, and I think you have a more optimistic view of the percentage that can actually switch between customer service and proactive. I find it more like less than 10%, maybe closer to 5%. But however, whether you're right and I'm right, it's a small percentage.
It was scientifically derived by holding my finger in the air.
Yeah, fair enough. I held two fingers in the air, so it's a little bit more scientifically derived.
That's twice as precise.
Yes, twice as swaggy. So with this notion of proactive inside sales, here's kind of a scenario that we're talking about. We're talking about taking roughly the second decile of your customers by revenue. So the first decile is if you got 10,000 customers, it's your top 1,000 customers. Second decile is your next 1,000 customers. We're talking about taking roughly that second decile. So in that example, there'd be 1,000 customers from that second decile. And we're looking at assigning 200 to 300 of them to your proactive inside sales rep. So in our math here, let's just say 250 is the number. That means you'd have 4 proactive inside sales reps. You can go slightly down from that second decile. You can go slightly up. We'll talk about some of the dynamics of what happens when you do that later on in the call, but that's roughly what we're talking about. And so this proactive inside sales rep is capable of making 20 to 25 contacts per day. I don't mean calls. I mean actually reaching 20 to 25 people per day. And the cost per contact is much, much lower than field sales. Actually, Ian and I have just finished writing with a number of field sales reps as part of a strategic assignment we're doing. And I think what we all know about field sales is if the route lines up for that day, you might get 4 or 5 customers, but that's going to be an unusual day, right?
I think sorry, Jonathan.
Please go ahead.
I think the research says it's 2.5 or 3. And I know that sounds low, but if you think about the time that sales reps spend in the office, sorting out paperwork or fixing problems or district training or vacation, or just meetings or days when something goes wrong with the customer and they're at one customer for half the day, the numbers really are 2.5 to 3 customer sales calls per day for an outside rep. And even if you're optimistic and you think it's 4, it's still a small fraction of what an inside sales rep can do because they're not driving. They're just picking up the phone.
That's right. That's exactly right. And also, again, you're looking at different kinds of opportunities. So field sales rep might be looking at minimum $50,000 opportunities, whereas the proactive inside sales rep is looking at maybe $10,000 to $50,000 opportunities. However, as we know, they're higher gross margin. If you're in construction, it's probably 5 points higher gross margin. If you're in industrial, it could be as much as 10 points higher gross margin.
Yeah, and the cost is lower.
The cost is lower, yeah. So we're going to talk about, let me just finish sort of the model, and then we'll talk about the benefits. So this ends up being a what's good for the goose is good for the gander scenario, because your sales calls in the proactive scenario can be done in 5 to 15 minutes instead of 30 to 60. So your customers like that. You like it, and you can reach more people in a day. By the way, we've done a lot of research on how people like to shop and buy, and it turns out that a large portion of customers don't want to see a sales rep. Like 30 to 40% want to see a sales rep once a year or never. Once a year is basically never, right? So it depends on the sector you're in. And that trend is increasing. These numbers that I'm quoting are roughly pre-COVID, but as we know, in the whole hybrid world that we now live in because of COVID, there's even less desire to interact in person. So again, good for the goose, good for the gander. Your customers get a 5 to 15 minute visit instead of 30 to 60. You can extend sales coverage to mid-size accounts where the outside reps are probably not going to work them, right? The outside rep might take calls from them, but they're probably not going to work them. And yes, so then if we look at the sort of overall benefits of the proactive inside sales approach, here's numbers that we've seen. And by the way, we've helped a number of distributors implement and create a proactive inside sales capability. Typical growth in those mid-size accounts at second decile is 15 to 20%. That's not an outlier. The phenomena is that as soon as you start to give those customers love, because they're probably not getting them from your competitors either, because they don't have a proactive inside sales group. As soon as you start to give those customers some love and attention, they're going to start buying from you.
And Jonathan, if I can just jump in for a second, you just pointed out something really important, which is that there's less competition for those mid-size accounts because everybody's got outside sales reps. Well, most distributors and your competitors have outside sales reps. Very few of them have an organized, proactive inside sales effort, which means that if you're calling those customers, even though it's just over the phone, you're not competing with those people who only use outside reps because they're too small for their reps too.
I love that. Given all the time we've thought about this, we haven't had that idea, Ian. So that's great. Yeah, less competition.
I'm just pulling it out.
Okay, fair enough. So you can grow those mid-size accounts 15 to 20%. As I mentioned before, you can increase the gross profit through higher margin accounts. You can reduce sales comp on these mid-size accounts, 30 to 35, maybe 40%. In other words, there's a real possibility that you are overpaying your field sales rep for these accounts that he or she is not working very well, or not working very hard, I should say.
And then more cost. because you don't have T&E. These people aren't driving around, they aren't taking people to lunch.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have a car allowance, and they make less money. So, you know, and they make 10 times as many calls per day, or even if you were pessimistic about it, you say it's 5 or 6 times as many calls today. The math works on the cost side, the math works on the productivity side. And that's what justifies the sales coverage for these mid-sized accounts, because it's just so much cheaper to call on them.
Yeah, it's so much cheaper. And this is another benefit that I hadn't thought about, but you extend the geographic reach. So think about Canada, whose smallest province is like the size of Texas. You know, we think of Texas as large, but you go like to a Canadian province and you get outside of, 100 miles from the US border, it's tough to service those accounts. Field sales is just the distances just don't make sense. So you can, in places where it's sparse population, could be northern part of the US, North Dakota, Montana, et cetera, you can extend the reach significantly. A final thing is that because of the customer starting to get the attention, the customer retention improves significantly. If you look at your top decile customers, you should probably have 90+% retention of those customers from year to year. As you look at the mid-size, you might start to see 80 to 85%, and then you get the bottom 8 deciles of your business. It might be 65%. So you can start to improve retention in these accounts because you're starting to give them service. I think we should say a couple other things about the model here of this proactive inside sales. One is it does take about 4 to 6 months for somebody to really get up to speed, to really get working these accounts. So if you look at say calls per day metrics, you're going to see that start low. If you create a program, they might be able to reach 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 people a day in the first month or so. But then by month 4 or 5 or 6, they are hitting 20 to 25 per day. So let's see here. Let's talk about really, go ahead.
Well, we should make sure that we tell people that you're welcome to ask questions, and somebody just did. So we got a couple here. If you are suggesting transitioning tier 2 customers to inside sales and away from field sales, how do you propose to handle the loss of income, presuming some sales at higher margins come in to the field seller? Friction between inside and outside sellers has been observed due to this.
At some point, this issue has to be confronted, and we're going to talk about the keys to success. At some point, there's going to be a feeling of dislocation for somebody, probably field sales, by the way.
Well, I mean, the other side of the coin is, are you willing to pay people commissions on sales that they're not driving?
That's right.
So look, these, sometimes I'll ride with the sales rep, and they've got, when we just made these sales calls recently, these reps had 10, 20, 30 accounts, which means they were sized right. But I've ridden with salespeople who have 200 accounts, and they know, and I know, and management knows they're not calling on anything more than the top 20 or 30 unless somebody calls with a problem, right? So they're not earning those commissions. So, you can adjust the commission rate for the account managers for the 20 or 30 they're actually calling on, because I'm not, why would you augment their income for work by paying them for work they're not doing? Pay them for the work they're doing. Don't commission them on accounts they're not providing any benefit to.
And also free them up to go work those 10, 20, or 30 accounts, right? So instead of being distracted with these smaller accounts, you now have more time to focus on those 10, 20, or 30 accounts.
And maybe another 5.
Right, another 5, exactly.
So maybe your outside reps go from 25 to 30, and they're meaningful accounts and they can make more commission on them, or you adjust their rate, but don't pay them for work they're not doing. Right. And then we have another, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
We have another question. Would you consider the traction time with the customer to be shorter or longer than an outside sales rep? So I would say that depends more on the experience level of the individual involved than it does the nature of the work. Most of the time, if a person is brand new to the industry, brand new to the company, it's going to take them a long time to ramp up as an inside sales rep, right? Just because of inexperience. If they are, if they're one of your customer service people and you've tested them with predictive index or something, and you've realized, oh my gosh, this person should be in sales, they're going to ramp up really fast, right? They're going to go, wow, now I'm an outbound seller. I'm hungry. I'm a hunter. I'm going to go get that business. They may ramp up in 6 weeks, right? If they're brand new, it's going to take them a much longer period of time. But that's also true with outside sales. But I will add this. If you do this right, and you really put the right people in those inside sales roles, then you greatly enhance your ability to find outside salespeople, because his inside salespeople are trained and ready to go when you move them outside, and they ramp up immediately. Because you've been managing, for the last 2 years, you've been managing this second tier of accounts. You've learned the business, the company, you understand the products, you understand how to make sales calls. When I turn you into an outside account manager and I give you 20 bigger accounts now, you're going to be effective much, much more rapidly. So it becomes a career progression for your outside salespeople. And, it's really expensive when your outside salespeople fail. And if you have a pool of inside salespeople to draw from, you increase the odds that those new outside salespeople, because of their background in inside sales, are going to be effective faster and going to be better at it.
And let's look at one going the other direction, which is something that we've seen in some of the implementations we've done. You've got a career sales rep who doesn't want to be bag carrying anymore. They may be in the twilight of their career, perhaps stimulated by COVID. They want to do more work from home, or they want more of a hybrid style. Some of them can convert into inside sales reps proactive inside sales reps as you start to get this initiative going.
All right, let's see. Oh yeah, this person, the person who asked the question about the ramp up time, said experience of the current inside salesperson, if they end up being capable of outbound calls, as a pro versus con of the current inside sales staff. I also believe that this would be a great training ground for outside sales. Great point. Okay, so they're just agreeing with us. But we've seen it over and over again, right? Where distributor after distributor, they establish this robust inside sales capability, and we're going to talk about how you have to organize that to make it successful. But It really does become this training ground for their outside sales force.
So let me just talk through a scenario of a $200 million distributor that's doing a 25% gross margin. If we look at the year one, it's going to, as we mentioned, there's going to be that 4 to 6 month ramp time, or I guess the term that this question asked was traction time. So the revenue and the total value in year one is going to be smaller, but basically you're looking at 3 things. You're looking at the lift from inside sales. I mentioned that 15 to 20%. You're looking at some bump in customer retention, and you're looking at field sales cost reduction, right? You're reducing the comp that you would be paying to field sales. So in this scenario, you've got 900 customers totaling about 20 million of revenue, 31% gross margin for proactive inside sales reps. Over a 5-year period, we would see an annual revenue lift of about 3 million, an annual gross profit lift of about $1 million, a reduction in the compensation of about $250,000. And all of this in financial, fancy financial terms has got a net present value of about $1.5 million. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. I think the case for this pre-COVID was strong already. I think in COVID or end of COVID, post-COVID, wherever we are, the case for this model is even stronger and could even be potentially done in a bit of a hybrid mode where you've got a proactive inside sales rep who 1 day a week gets in a car, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I've talked to a lot of great account managers who told me that they're spending more time on the phone than they used to because COVID taught them that they can be effective over the phone. So I think, you're not telling your outside sales reps never to make phone calls, but the accounts they manage are accounts that they do see on a regular basis. We do have another question. Do you think that Barbara, the unicorn we mentioned, so this is the customer service person who's turns into a great outside sales rep, or excuse me, proactive inside sales rep. Do you think that Barbara should be contacting the outside sales rep on the status of her conversations with his accounts? Well, in our model, she wouldn't be talking to his accounts.
That's right. Yeah, we've had Mark Peck on before. We did a 3-part series with Mark last year. Mark actually likes a coordinated approach, and that's another variant of this. But as Ian said, they wouldn't be overlapping in the same accounts.
Yeah. So I mean, in Mark's approach for very, very large accounts, and I think this is worth considering, and we weren't really going to go there today, but since someone brought it up, it's worth mentioning. Let's say that you're a power transmission distributor or an automation distributor, and you manage a series of Exxon refineries in Houston. It's unlikely that any outside account manager can efficiently get to know everybody who works at all those refineries, because it's just maybe hundreds of people that you need to build a relationship with. In Mark Peck's model, you would actually combine into a team, the outside sales rep and an inside sales rep or two, and they would share commissions, but they would support each other. That's for most distributors and most accounts, that's not what we're talking about. For most distributors and most accounts, you either assign an account to an outside rep or an inside rep.
Exactly. So I'm going to throw up a piece here, put up a piece that we're going to talk through that actually relates to the next question that we have. So if we can hold that question for a moment, I'd like to share.
So for you podcast listeners, we'll walk through this verbally. You won't get lost.
That's right. So if we look at the keys to outbound success, the first one is getting the right accounts for the proactive inside sales rep. If you say, here, take these house accounts and try to make something of them, accounts that might be doing 5,000 or less, the numbers probably don't work because you.
Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan, but I want to jump in when you're done.
Yeah, it's probably hard to get enough revenue at 250 accounts with average, let's say 3,000 per account. The numbers don't quite work to get a return. So it's really key to figure out what is the right size, the Goldilocks, if you will, for the accounts that they should be handling. I've seen 10 to 50,000 as a range. I've seen some companies try to go higher than 50,000, meaning they're actually starting to take from the bottom part of that top decile because they know that proactive inside sales can do it well, because they don't want to pay the fees to the field sales reps. There's a whole efficiency thing of actually starting to eat up market. But the real key thing is if you say, here, take these accounts that have not done much, you're probably not going to get a return. Go ahead, Ian.
Well, one exception I've seen where this does work is if you have no idea what the potential is for a large number of small accounts.
Yes.
And you give that proactive inside sales rep 6 months to build their own account package, and you leave them on salary while they do that. So you say, look, I've got 300 accounts here, or 500 accounts here, or 1,000 accounts. It's probably more like 1,000 because ultimately you want to wind up with a couple hundred. And for the next 6 months, you just make outbound calls, see if you can cultivate some relationships and make your own sales package out of them. I don't think that's as efficient as doing an analytical exercise in advance. I'm defining potential and giving them a narrower set, but I have seen that work before.
I think that's a really great point, which is one way to look at the accounts you give is the actual, how they performed. Another is the potential. If you have a model, by the way, talk to us if you want to build a model for sales potential. We have an analytic model on a SaaS platform. But if you have a model for potential and a model for actual, then you can say, great, we're going to assign 80% of the accounts based on actual, and we're going to assign 20% of the accounts based on potential, the so-called acorn that could grow into an oak. So I think that's really, really key. Again, I would say one more thing, by the way, two of the absolutely most obscenely profitable distributors I've ever seen have only proactive inside sales. One of them was 25% EBITDA. Hope you're all sitting down when you hear that. And the other was about a 21% EBITDA. I am not by any means promising that if you do this right, you're going to get a 20 or 25% EBITDA, but it is curious to notice that the companies that do this really well are also super profitable. So
yeah, margins are going to go up because these are just higher margin customers.
That's right, but you're not going to get that much higher margin that you're suddenly at 20% EBITDA. Okay,
Right.
let's talk about right people with the right skill sets, Ian. So we've spoken about the psychographic of getting somebody who is sales oriented as opposed to service oriented. Can you say more about that? Some of the things you've seen that service people do that salespeople don't do, and vice versa.
Yeah, so this is an insidious problem, because the people who are great at proactive inside selling, you can give them a telephone and a list of accounts, and they can manage accounts and do it well and grow them like an account manager. They happen to look exactly like your inside sales reps, your customer service people, right? They're sitting at a desk, they have a headset, they have a phone, they have a computer. The problem is on the inside, they're totally different. The psychographics of someone who is a great proactive seller over the phone is similar to that of an outside sales rep. They're by nature hungry to grow sales, they profit and money driven, and they don't want to take a bunch of calls and expedite orders and solve problems for people. They want to grow sales. They want to talk about deals and upcoming projects and adding product lines and growing customers. And so you really have to do some kind of testing, some kind of personality profiling to understand who's good, who's likely to be good at this and who's not. And the most common mistake, and I bet you a lot of people on this call can relate to this because people try it over and over again and always fails, is they try what I mentioned earlier, which is somebody says, usually VP of sales, we've got all these people answering calls, but sometimes they're not very busy because sometimes the call volume comes down. So why don't we give them this big printout or Excel file of 1,000 customers who haven't bought from us in a while, and when they're not making outbound calls, or when they're not taking inbound calls, they should make outbound calls and see if they can sell something to those customers. And then everybody gets frustrated because that group can't do it. And if you've ever sat on the phone with a distributor, customer service person, or what they call inside sales rep, in a distribution center or in a branch, while they tried to make these outbound calls, it's uncomfortable for them, it's uncomfortable for the customer, so the inside sales rep goes, I really don't want to make this call, but I have to. So they call someone, yeah, hi, Barbara, it's Ian. I better not say Barbara, I already used that name. Hi, Bob, it's Ian, from XYZ Distribution. Oh, hi, Ian. What's going on? Well, do you need anything today? No. Oh, okay, thanks. Have a good day.
Right. Yeah. So I think that brings us to another key point here, which is go for the sales athlete as opposed to the person with the knowledge. So if in general, there are going to be exceptions to this, but in general, you should hire the superior salesperson as opposed to the person who has superior knowledge of your products right now. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people because you think, oh, our business is so unique or our business is so technical. But what we've seen routinely is that the sales athlete tends to perform better than the person who's really steeped in the business.
Right.
Okay. I guess another part of that is that if you're hiring more of a sales athlete than somebody who knows the business, you've got to have training for them, right? They're going to have to get product training. They're going to have to get application training. They're going to have to, they may get some sales training as well, but they're definitely going to there's going to be a curve for them to come up to speed on your product. And like a good sales rep, but they've got a CSR who knows products, who can do quotes. So that's part of the support system for making these people work well and effectively. Third one, common mistake that we see is people say, well, yeah, in the example that Ian just mentioned, it's a counter rep who's being asked to make some calls in their downtime. What we've seen is that this works best when you have a centralized group. Right. And there's several reasons for that benefit. One is they get the benefit of working together. So there's learned skills that they develop, success. There's even healthy competition when they're sitting in the same place. There's a better ability to manage them. So we've told people this again and again and again. And I would say about half the folks we've done this for have listened to our advice. About half have not, and they've regretted that they said we're gonna decentralize this away from a central location and put it in the branch. Thoughts or comments?
Here's another issue. If you just put them in the branch office or in the branch where they're in the workflow, they get sucked into the branch work when the branch is busy. So, I mean, you got someone making outbound calls, that's not time critical, or there's not a specific deadline around it. Suddenly you're busy on the phones and the branch manager turns to your proactive inside sales rep and says, hey, can you just help us out for a minute? We're really overloaded on the phones. Or, hey, we're busy at the counter. Can you run out and take care of a couple of customers? And they get drawn into the branch work. And that really kills the effort.
Yeah, so that actually our fifth point here is having devoted resources to the program.
Right, but I'm saying even if you say they're devoted, if you put them in the branch where they're in the workflow, they wind up getting diverted.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So it's really important that you have people that are devoted. Don't try to do the Minotaur half man, half is it horse or something. Make it a devoted sales rep. You wouldn't think of making a sales rep half field sales rep and half customer service rep. Don't do that with your proactive inside sales folks. The fourth point is senior management support. I mentioned earlier in the call or earlier in the discussion that at some point there's going to be an uncomfortable discussion with field sales. And it's either with field sales management and or with field sales themselves, where field sales management doesn't want to give up these accounts. So if you put the program under field sales to begin with, they'll say, here, take these accounts that haven't performed well and try to make something happen, and nothing will happen. So getting the right senior management support at the P&L level and at the sales level to say, yeah, we're really going to support this. We're going to give them accounts that they can make a living on. We're going to have the hard discussion of adjusting territories from accounts that aren't being worked. The senior management support is critical to the success. Yeah, I think we've got a couple questions here. Do you want to take the first one?
Sure. Once the right accounts are identified, what is the account management versus business development split from a time perspective? Or do you have one of each working in tandem, one hunter, one farmer? So again, we're going to structure this just like you would your outside sales force, right? So you're not going to rely on these proactive inside sellers to do prospecting once they have an account package. I mean, they might do a little bit, and that's fine, just like your outside reps might do a little bit, and that's fine. In my experience, if you want to have a prospecting role, then you would do, what this person mentions, which is you would specifically identify the account managers who are farmers. In other words, they have an account package that they manage over the phone, and they call these customers on a regular basis and generate orders and manage deals, et cetera. And then you have a hunter group, and they prospect with the intention of identifying new accounts that they should hand off to outside sales reps or proactive inside sales reps. Do you agree with that, Jonathan?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And the other thing that if you try to make them into a service person as well, is that once they start to get enough accounts, then they're going to start getting all kinds of inbound calls, and they won't have time to make the outbound calls. So it's yet another reason to make them devoted to the outbound, the proactive function, rather than taking support calls.
Yeah, they need to tell their customers, when you just need to place an order, just go ahead and call the branch or call the ordering number. Don't call me just to place an ordinary order. Because you really want to focus them on outbound calls.
We've got a great question here. Since COVID, branches aren't what they used to be. Many that were working from a centralized branch are now working from home. Totally agreed. And presumably there is also somewhat of a hotel office model, which is what a lot of companies are going to. So they could still be working from home, but they are in an area where if they're in the hotel model, they're in the office working, and they have the benefit of others. So I think it is possible to do these remotely, but it's probably in a hotel style environment, hotel office model that is becoming more common.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of distributors have gone back to bringing people into the branches because a lot of times the people who answer the phones also back up the counter in the warehouse at times, so you get a labor efficiency play there. But if people are working from home, then you're just going to have to set up your proactive inside selling effort remotely and keep people connected on Zoom like a lot of organizations do.
Right. You want to take the next one?
Sure. Under what circumstances would you transition an inside sales account to an outside seller? And how do you compensate the inside seller for that growth that justifies moving it to an outside seller? Well, I mean, like whatever the model is that you have for outside sellers, you're going to transition that inside sales rep to a new account package, not the one they've been managing typically, because those customers are too small. And you're going to pay them like your other outside sellers, right? They're not going to move from inside to outside and take all of their accounts with them. There may be a couple that got big enough that they take with them, but for the most part, you're, creating a new sales territory, and that inside seller is being promoted to a larger set of accounts, or a set of larger accounts, I should say.
And I would say there's another scenario here that would make sense, which is sometimes you will designate accounts that are field sales potential to be groomed by inside sales. So we say, look, this is a 100,000 potential account, but we'd like to have somebody groom it on inside sales with the understanding that it's going to be handed off at some point.
Which is a good point, because you need some business rules about how you move accounts from inside sales to outside sales and back again. You need to be consistent about how you apply them, because let's face it, some accounts are going to get too big to be managed by an inside sales rep, and they need to move to an outside rep. Just be clear about what the rules are and how you make that decision so that nobody's surprised, including how you pay them. Next one's yours, Jonathan.
Okay, I got it, bro. Next one is, can you explain the hotel model more? Not sure I understand. So what we're hearing from distributors and actually other businesses is an office model where you don't have a designated office. You come in, you have the ability to plug into an office with your computer, presumably your cell phone. You're using it for the day. The next time you come in, which might be later that week or the next week, you might end up physically in a different office. So that's kind of the hotel model that's starting to emerge.
And in branches, a lot of times it's not an office. It's either a cubicle or it's just an area where everybody sits with different desks. But you move away from having a dedicated space, and people just share it. They take whatever's available when they come in.
Okay, let's take the next point here. Good incentives and recognition programs. We've mentioned that the total comp for the proactive inside sales rep could be 30 to 40% lower than the field sales. So what does that look like? I think there's really a couple ways to go. Not a big surprise here. You could do a commission model, or you could do a bonus model. However you get to that 30 to 40% less than the field sales rep, whether it's through bonus or through a commission model, is probably fair game. Obviously, your base compensation is going to be up from what your CSRs are earning. So it's going to vary by geography, but your base compensation might be in the 50K range, and you might be looking to get these people up to 70 or 80K total comp. If they're making their numbers. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the hard part is when if an account grows so fast, you hand it off to an outside rep.
Yeah.
And that's why you need those business rules, and you may actually pay double commissions for some period of time to ease the transition. Or maybe you do a swap where outside account managers can only have 25 accounts. So if you want to take one of these accounts that used to be managed by proactive inside sellers, and you have to give one up.
So follow up on the question on the business rules for moving accounts. How do folks with successful inside selling organizations avoid a culture of inside reps trying to keep accounts under a certain threshold so they don't get moved, or an incentive for when an account gets flipped to field sales? I haven't seen a phenomenon of somebody trying to hoard accounts by making them less successful. Have you seen that?
No, but I think he ends with, should you pay an incentive to the proactive inside seller when an account gets flipped to field sales? I have seen that, where if you grow an account successfully and to the point where an outside seller picks it up, you get a spiff of, a couple $1,000 or something like that. So you want to reduce the friction between the outside sellers and your proactive inside sellers by incenting everybody to grow customers all the time.
Next question is, if a proactive inside rep is assigned 250 accounts, what's a reasonable expectation on how often they should contact each customer? So let's do some simple math here. At 20 contacts per day, that's the lower end of that range that we mentioned earlier of 20 to 25. They've got roughly 5,000 contacts, call it 4,500 to 5,000 contacts per year that they could make, depending how much vacation seniority they have. As with field sales, you're going to see a clustering of revenue among the top 25 to probably 30 of those 250 accounts. So you're going to be making more of those calls to those top 25 or 30 accounts, and then there's going to be a distribution. But I would say even for the ones that are not in the top 25 or 30 accounts there, these customers should be touched at least monthly, if not quarterly.
Yeah, I mean, the average is once every 10 days, right? Roughly,
Right.
or every 12
Yes.
days, and business days. And then, again, you're going to have a bell curve where you call some people more often, some people less often, and that'll naturally work out over time as people understand certain customers' willingness to buy from you. But yeah, I would say nobody gets contacted less than once a month, because if they merit less than that, you should take them off of the proactive inside sellers assigned account list.
Great questions today. Good job, audience.
Fantastic.
I think we have one more piece here. So the final piece is making sure that you've got the infrastructure to support the proactive inside sales group. It's tough. I won't say it's tough. It just doesn't work to manage 250 accounts in Excel. You can't do it. You've got to have a minimal kind of CRM at least to support all the contacts you're supposed to make, opportunities, tasks for follow-up, et cetera, tracking activity. So you really have to have a CRM. And by the way, if you are thinking about doing CRM, one of the things that we've seen is that starting a proactive inside sales group can be a great laboratory for getting your CRM going. So rather than rolling it out to all of your field sales reps who may be somewhat resistant to it, or maybe are likely to be resistant to it, get your 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, proactive inside sales reps going on who absolutely have to have this to be successful.
Yeah, no, I think you really have to have that infrastructure, and and from our experience, the proactive inside sellers are much more willing to use the CRM. They really need it to be efficient. Right. So you don't have the adoption problems that you have with your outside reps.
I would say one more thing, by the way, depending on the size of your company, you could start literally with 1 or 2 proactive inside sales reps. It doesn't have to be, a massive call center with butts and seats. You literally could start with 1 or 2. I don't recommend 1, because if that person's the wrong person and it fails, you conclude the program's not good.
Plus they're lonely.
Yeah, right. They don't have the camaraderie. So starting with 2, if you're a smaller distributor, and you might end up with 2 or 3 at the end of the day. I think that's a reasonable place to start. Ian, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, how much input to this group? I think he means the proactive inside sellers. How much input to these proactive inside sellers is from sales versus operations, or is this a sales focused role, and all operations, quotes, et cetera, is handled by a traditional CSR? Yeah, the idea would be that this proactive inside seller is spending 90% of their time making outbound calls to grow business, and that for the most part, quotes, order expediting, et cetera, is being handled by the traditional CSR. You really want to train these proactive sellers. At first, they may be a little bit more engaged, but just like with the outside sales reps, you don't want them doing a bunch of order writing. If you can avoid it, you'd rather than focus on selling and have the calls go to the inside team. And I know there are lots of exceptions, but generally speaking, you want these outbound sellers making outbound calls. So it's a great question.
I think, again, to summarize what we said before, the best way to think about this is that the only difference between this proactive inside sales rep and your field sales rep is the proactive inside sales rep doesn't get in a car. Yeah. Would you have your FSR creating quotes? Hopefully not, or at least not very often.
lot of them do, but it's not efficient and they know it, right? And typically when they do, it's because they don't trust the inside salespeople to do the job right, which means you've
Yes.
got a training and hiring issue on the inside.
Good. So I'm happy to field any questions beyond this webcast podcast. As I mentioned, we've helped distributors establish these programs. We think they're essential in this decade. It's what your customers are wanting it. There's an opportunity here for you. You can create monetary value that has impact on the bottom line. So there's goodness here. Ian, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, there's one more question. We were contemplating having the proactive team handling web orders to use as a lead, as well as leads from manufacturers. Thoughts on this? What I would do is take those leads and those web orders and put them through an analytical model that you have to tell you whether or not the requester or the person ordering looks like they come from a company that has a significant amount of potential. And if they do, then I think this is a great way to make a first contact and use your proactive inside sellers to do it. But I wouldn't do it as a default for everything that comes in. If the local elementary school is making a one-time order in an electrical distributor, I wouldn't hand that off to an inside sales rep unless there's some reason to think that's a big account. So I think it's a good idea for prospects that seem to have high levels of potential. But I would analyze it first before you just hand it off to what's a relatively expensive sales resource related to a CSR. Last question, then we'll move on. What's the biggest risk for a distributor to implementing this type of group? To me, it's primarily execution risk, Jonathan. I mean, the model works, like we said, Mark Peck, who originally, he wrote a book on this. He taught me how to do it many years ago. And then, we've implemented, and he still does work for us, by the way. So if you want to, engage Mark, you can come through us and we'll help you set it up. But we know it works. And if you do it right, then it will probably work for you. The issue is people tend to do things like try to have their CSRs make outbound calls, or they don't screen for the right talent. And so it fails because they have a customer service person trying to play the role of a salesperson, or they, put them in the branch and they get sucked into the branch workflow when the branch is busy. I mean, there are all these ways you can fail that are execution related. It's not related to the merit of the idea. And so, I think it's execution risk. You want to add anything to that?
100% agree.
Okay. All right, my friend, you ready to wrap up?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so we've got a couple of upcoming events we wanted to tell you about. Please hang on for just a second if you want to bring those up, Jonathan. We have, let's see here. On December 7th, we have a technology panel about e-commerce. So we're going to have a group of distribution executives who work in e-commerce in a hosted conversation. We'll ask them questions and we'll talk about their experiences with e-commerce, including technology approaches, what's worked and what hasn't worked. That's again on December 7th. That's brought to you by Epicor. You're not going to want to miss that. It's the first one of these technology panels that we've done. We're very excited about it. And then on December 14th on this show, the Wholesale Change Show, we're delighted to be joined by Tony Harris, who's the founder of Think B2B. He's the former CMO of DigiKey, the formidable and very well-run electronic components distributor. Tony will be a fantastic guest. He's brilliant, and he's very, very good at explaining his thinking in ways that the rest of us can understand. He's just a brilliant guy. So I hope you'll join us. You can go to distributionstrategy.com and click on events to register for these events. If you want to reach Jonathan, he is jbein, Jbein at distributionstrategy.com. I'm Ian Heller at iheller@distributionstrategy.com. Jonathan, again, great to work with you, my friend.
Pleasure as always, Ian.
All right. Until we see you next time, thanks for joining us. Happy sales to you. And thanks for being on the Wholesale Change Show. Bye now.